The greatest nutritional paradox of the industrial age is not the discovery of a superfood, but the deliberate eradication of one that was already pervasive. Imagine a plant so pharmacologically potent, so ubiquitous, and so nutritionally complete that it formed the core of regional medicine for over 1,000 years. A plant whose massive commercial potential was ultimately neutralized by the simple fact that it grew everywhere, uncontrollably, and could never be effectively patented or monetized by an exclusive vendor. This forced economic inconvenient truth led to its reclassification, not as the essential crop it was, but as an enemy of manicured lawns and mechanized agriculture, systematically targeted by broad-spectrum herbicides and culturally deemed a pestilential weed, effectively erasing collective knowledge about the most powerful, free detoxifying agent available globally. Welcome to the Veritas Archive. If these stories matter, if the systematic erasure of foundational wisdom concerning physiology and survival alarms you, the best way to preserve this knowledge is simple. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this file widely with those who need to understand the true architecture of human health outside the closed systems. The subject of our investigation, now relegated to backyard nuisance status, is Taraxacum officinale, commonly known today as the dandelion. Its historical anchor is far deeper and more esteemed than its modern reputation suggests, tracing sophisticated usage back to the 10th and 11th century CE within the sophisticated medical traditions of the Arabic and Persian empires, and concurrently within the foundational herbal canons of traditional Chinese medicine, where it was classified as Pu Gong-ing. However, its widespread establishment in Western pharmacopoeia solidified around the 15th century CE, primarily through monastic European gardening, where it became the primary source for liver and kidney support. The specific genus name, Taraxacum, is thought to derive from the Persian Tarkashkun, meaning wild chicory, or perhaps linking it to the ancient Greek terracene, to disorder or disturb, in reference to its powerful cathartic and detoxifying actions. Medieval physicians prized the entire plant, but specifically the bitter compounds concentrated in the root and leaf latex, known collectively as the sesquiterpene lactones, which they understood, albeit without modern chemical tools, were the drivers of biliary and renal flow. The conflict between this pervasive, potent, and free resource and the burgeoning industrial pharmaceutical framework of the 20th century centered precisely on its mechanism of action: sophisticated, simultaneous hepatoprotective and diuretic effects. The primary mechanisms that made dandelion invaluable and simultaneously a threat to proprietary drug development involved the compound taraxacin. Taraxacin, a bitter principle found predominantly in the milky sap, latex, is responsible for its profound choleretic and cholagogue activities. Choleretic refers to the stimulation of bile production within the hepatocytes, while cholagogue describes the action of inducing the gallbladder to contract and release stored bile into the duodenum. This dual-action flushing mechanism is critical for the excretion of metabolic byproducts, lipid-soluble toxins, and excess cholesterol that have been processed by the phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification pathways in the liver. When this natural, accessible process was recognized as being vastly superior in complexity and efficacy to early synthetic liver tonics, it posed a direct competitive threat to emerging patented formulas. Furthermore, the plant presented a crucial paradox in the realm of renal physiology and diuretic therapeutics. Diuretics are agents that promote diuresis, increasing the rate of urine flow and sodium excretion, often used to manage hypertension or edematous states. However, the majority of effective pharmaceutical diuretics, specifically loop diuretics like furosemide or thiazides, function by inhibiting ion transporters in the renal tubules, leading inevitably to significant urinary loss of essential electrolytes, most critically potassium, K+, resulting in hypokalemia. This required co-prescription of potassium supplements or potassium-sparing agents, increasing the complexity and cost of treatment protocols. Taraxacum officinale completely bypassed this systemic deficiency. It is, arguably, the ideal natural potassium-sparing diuretic. The leaves of the dandelion are exceptionally rich in potassium, containing concentrations sometimes exceeding 4% by dry weight, making the plant itself a natural potassium supplement. Therefore, When its triterpenoids and phenolic compounds induced diuresis, the inevitable concomitant loss of endogenous potassium was immediately and effectively balanced by the massive influx of exogenous potassium from the plant matrix itself. This meant the plant could achieve robust diuretic action without the dangerous side effect profile of induced electrolyte imbalance, a capability synthetic chemistry struggled and still struggles to mimic in a single, unadulterated molecule. The studies documenting this superior electrolytic balance demonstrated why dandelion, cheap and pervasive, had to be culturally and chemically suppressed to clear market space for complex, regulated, and patented drug regimens requiring multiple prescriptions. The final element of its suppression stemmed from its role as a superior functional food. The dandelion root is highly concentrated in inulin, a type of fructan. Inulin is a non-digestible prebiotic fiber that travels intact to the large intestine, where it acts as a highly selective substrate for beneficial microbiota, particularly bifidobacteria and lactobacilli. This profound modulation of the gut microbiome, directly supporting the foundation of systemic immunity and nutrient assimilation, adds a layer of foundational health support that far exceeds simple detoxification. In the post-World War II era, as chemical agriculture scaled and monocropping became the norm, the targeted application of herbicides like 2,4-D, specifically designed to eliminate broadleaf plants and spare grass crops, solidified the dandelion's status as a biological enemy, systematically eliminating it from farm fields and residential areas, ensuring that its immense nutritional and pharmacological wisdom was literally plowed under. Despite the concerted effort to erase its utility, the dandelion consistently resurges, often in moments of systemic crisis or extreme resource scarcity. During both world wars, foraging for wild dandelion greens, a rich source of vitamins A, K, C, and essential trace minerals like manganese and iron, became a necessity, offsetting dietary deficiencies caused by rationing and economic collapse. The persistence of its cultural memory meant that when pharmaceutical supply chains buckled, or when economic hardship limited access to regulated medicine, populations instinctively turned back to the ubiquitous, free medicine growing in the cracks of the sidewalk. The resilient nature of the Taraxacum root system, a deep taproot that can reach 10 to 15 feet into compacted soil to draw up minerals others cannot access, is a biological metaphor for knowledge itself, which, once established, always finds a way to resurface despite layers of cultural or industrial pavement trying to hide it. The philosophical conclusion inherent in the history of Taraxacum officinale is one of profound, persistent resilience and the illusion of centralized control over fundamental biological requirements. The dandelion demonstrates that the most effective and elegant solutions to human physiological needs often reside not in complex, proprietary laboratory synthesis, but in readily available, naturally balanced ecosystems. Its story is a potent reminder that knowledge suppression is often an economic strategy masquerading as scientific advancement. To ignore the ancient wisdom embedded in our immediate environment is to concede sovereignty over our own health to systems that profit from our dependency. Like the plant itself, which persists in cracking concrete to reach the light, we must cultivate the resilience to seek and integrate the foundational truths that the contemporary marketplace seeks to bury beneath layers of manufactured convenience and regulatory complexity. The dandelion's molecular sovereignty, the true source of its subversive utility, resides within its intricate profile of triterpenoids, specifically taraxasterol, pseudotaraxasterol, and their acetylated isomers. These compounds do not function through a brute force antagonism typical of many synthetic pharmaceuticals, but rather through subtle, pleiotropic modulation of fundamental cellular signaling cascades. Rigorous pharmacokinetic studies have meticulously documented the root extract's pronounced capacity to attenuate the activation of the nuclear factor kappa B, or NF-kappa B, pathway. NF-kappa B is the master regulator of the chronic inflammatory response, a transcription factor central to the pathology of virtually all chronic diseases, from metabolic syndrome to neurodegeneration. By suppressing the phosphorylation and subsequent nuclear translocation of NF-kappa B subunits, P50 and P65, dandelion effectively interrupts the genomic instruction to synthesize a cascade of pro-inflammatory cytokines, such as tumor necrosis factor alpha, TNF-alpha, and interleukin-6, IL-6. This is not a superficial reduction of symptoms. It is a foundational, non-toxic reset of the cellular inflammatory status, offering systemic resilience that far surpasses single-target pharmaceutical interventions, which often necessitate severe immune suppression with crippling side effect profiles. This profound anti-inflammatory mechanism directly intersects with dandelion's critical interaction point within the hepatic architecture, substantiating its ancient reputation as a superior cholagogue and detoxifier. The root's unique chemical ensemble exhibits a selective and buffered induction of phase 2 biotransformation enzymes. While many compounds, especially those categorized as detox aids, induce phase 1 cytochrome P450 enzymes, a necessary step that often paradoxically generates highly reactive intermediate metabolites, dandelion root extracts favor the conjugation pathways, which are the essential closing steps of safe detoxification. Key among these upregulated pathways is glucuronidation, catalyzed by UDP-glucuranosiltransferases, UGTs, and the action of glutathione S-transferases, GSTs. Glucuronidation is the single most important route for detoxifying lipophilic environmental toxins, excess endogenous hormones, particularly estrogen metabolites, and xenobiotics, rendering them highly polar and water-soluble for immediate renal and biliary excretion. This targeted support prevents the accumulation of carcinogenic or hormonally disruptive intermediates, addressing a fundamental bottleneck in the compromised endogenous detoxification systems of modern industrialized life. It serves as a biological insurance policy against the inescapable environmental burden of the petrochemical age, a capability rendered invaluable and non-redundant. This depth of molecular activity has inevitably forced a reluctant, yet persistent, reinvestigation within the most proprietary sectors of mainstream scientific endeavor, most prominently in targeted oncology. The dandelion root extract, or DRE, has been demonstrated in compelling in vitro and rapidly progressing in vivo studies, conducted primarily at institutions initially dedicated to synthetic pharmacology, to selectively induce apoptosis, programmed cell death, in various human cancer cell lines, including chronic myelomonocytic leukemia, CMML, and aggressive melanomas, while leaving non-cancerous, healthy cells entirely unscathed. The mechanism, extensively mapped, involves the triterpenoid fraction disrupting the mitochondrial membrane potential and initiating the subsequent release of cytochrome C, thereby triggering the intrinsic apoptotic cascade. This highly specific cytotoxic profile, which bypasses the systemic collateral damage characteristic of conventional chemotherapy, fundamentally challenges the long-held institutional premise that therapeutic innovation must always originate from complex, proprietary synthetic libraries. The ongoing human clinical trials, though cautiously managed and tightly controlled to prevent the leakage of intellectual property into the public domain, represent a tacit, unavoidable admission. The ubiquitous weed that was systematically eliminated for decades holds the blueprint for sophisticated, nuanced biological warfare against chronic disease, a blueprint hidden in plain sight, mocking the intellectual arrogance of the industrial complex that sought its eradication purely for economic dominance. Its persistence is the ultimate biological refutation of patented scarcity.